Okay. So good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday to everyone listening today. We are very excited to have the leader of the Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa franchise system here today. His name is Todd Leff, and Todd is a Philadelphia native, and I have had the pleasure of working with and for Todd for the last, well, this is our 11th year together, and so I guess something's working okay. So Todd, welcome to the show, and more importantly, welcome to the treatment room.
Well, thanks, Bob. I'm glad to be on this morning, and look forward to speaking with you.
Sure. So for people that don't know your background, Todd, would you mind spending 30 seconds to a minute or so? And if you go over, that's fine. I know you're a former trial attorney, but if you don't mind giving a little bit about your background and tell the folks your experiences, that would be great.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm a former trial attorney many years ago, and was actually a federal prosecutor in the Philadelphia area. Worked for the U.S. Department of Justice, and left the government to go work in a franchise company at the time. Relatively small franchise company. It was Cotton Transmission, and over the years, had the good fortune of growing that business. Doing a series of transactions with private equity, and ultimately we grew that business to a point where we actually acquired our largest competitor in the U.S., which was Amco Transmissions. And for 5 years, I worked on really bringing those two companies together under one common ownership structure. We had 1,100 franchisees. It was about a $700 million system-wide sales business, and I was the CEO of the organization. So great experience there. Ultimately retired from that business and thought I was going to play golf, but it quickly became, being home 1 o'clock every day, had to find something else to do. And so, as you mentioned, 11 years ago, I invested in Hand and Stone, which was a startup at the time, along with the founder of the business, which was John Marco, a physical therapist, and was a wonderful partner of mine for many years. And, ultimately, we've been able to bring in a world-class management team, folks like yourself on the development side and others. And today, we find ourselves as 464 Handstone locations, over 400 million in system-wide sales, and the fastest growing in the industry. So it's been a fast 11 years, I think, right, Bob?
It has, and it's a good segue for the next question too, from a timing perspective, Todd. Because let me take you back now for 2.5-3 months ago, and I know you faced. I don't know that I can say similar circumstances, but I know you faced a lot of hurdles, in your experiences as leading teams and organizations. But taking you back, 75, 80 days or so, we see the effects of this pandemic. It's coming. We just don't know that it's going to be. We're thinking it's a minor tidal wave, not a tsunami. And then everything hits, and then you have to pull back the reins, and you're shutting down locations. Tell me, Todd, how does a CEO like yourself, who's led change up to over 1,000 units, and now this one approaching 500, how did you draw on your experiences, and what was your philosophy heading into this pandemic, and how did you react to it? Can you share those experiences with us?
Yeah, I did. I think at the outset, I thought very much could draw on prior experiences, having managed, major systems through, 9/11 and the aftermath, through the financial meltdown in 2008, 2009. At least at the outset, it looked very much like those, and learned a lot of lessons in managing through those crises. This one, I think, actually, obviously escalated to a point past the impact of those, both from an idea of actually shutting down a major part of the system, and then ultimately the entire system. But you go in with, I think we went in with some very strong core values, and that was, things. I think 3 major, kind of core values, which was make sure you had plans for every contingency. And we had ones in this instance of if we were closed for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, how did that impact the company and franchisees, and how could we protect franchisees over that long period of time? I think the second core value was make sure you over communicate. You have to communicate with the various constituencies that you're responsible to, whether that's franchisees, and we developed a platform of having a weekly system-wide webinar where we fill in, get franchisees filled in on latest information, communicating with employees and communicating with our investor base. And then third, it's about protecting the people that work in the system, particularly employees and also our franchisees, and how we protect them going forward. So if you go in with those core values and objectives, I think it allows you to draw on prior experience and plan.
So you obviously look at things from a macro level at first, and then obviously you kind of have to look at the underlying factors after that. And them being, in this case, if you look at it from a micro standpoint, you're looking at, from a spa level, franchisee to franchisee. What are the steps that you took after you looked at it from a macro level, Todd, to look at it from a micro level and say, okay, we're going to have to prepare to reopen these spas. Right. So what are the changes that you made to do differently when we do, right. Understanding what we're going through now?
Yeah. So we had three core objectives when we started closing down the first locations in mid-March. We laid out our game plan, and there were three core objectives. In the short term, it was preserving liquidity for franchisees, and that were things like deferring advertising payments, deferring our intellectual technology fee, helping franchisees get loans. So that was job one, and that was always kind of the core objective during the period that we were going to be closed. The second core part of the plan was protect employees and keep them motivated. And so we developed programs for the employee base at the franchisee level to both protect them, and that meant ordering 4 or 5 weeks before we're even thinking about reopening. We were already ordering hundreds of thousands of masks and stocking them at our warehouse, other PPE, making sure it was there so that when we do reopen, our employees could be protected. And then the third objective was, how do we reopen this business safely? How do we think about what this is going to look like in the new normal? And so there, we did not wait for the government to come and say, hey, this is what you have to do. We went out and hired our own panel of experts, a medical director, an infectious disease expert. We had an RN on the panel. And we basically consulted with them on what are the things we have to change or do different in this business to preserve the safety of consumers going forward, as well as our employees. And it was things like, requiring masks of all the employees during their hours, staggering shifts so that we have groups of workers coming in on various off days so that we can then contact trace in the event that there is some kind of incident, and so that the whole unit would not have to be shut down. Having spacing requirements, basically asking customers to wait in their vehicle and texting them so that they can immediately just go into the treatment room instead of sitting in the lobby. And then coming up with a contact light transaction where all of the transaction can basically be done, online, digitally, before the customer even comes into the unit and can check out the same way. So these are some of the steps, that we've taken. We were already an extremely hygienic business, having put water in all the rooms so that our service professionals can wash their hands before every service, having always changed all the linens between each service. So we were already doing, way more than most other businesses from a, hygiene and safety standpoint, but we've really taken it to another level with these experts.
It's, looking back and having been here for over a decade now, and have had just an incredible experience with the growth of the franchise system, because you see, you kind of grow up in this business with friends that have built this business, and you kind of you meet their kids, you see that now they're starting to go to college, and some are having babies. So it's been an unbelievable and rewarding experience. You've built, most of the team here, Todd, over the last 10 years, 11 years or so. What has surprised you going through what we're going through now, from either the team or the franchise base or the system itself, having gone through this pandemic now and starting to now reopen some locations? What has surprised you through that experience?
Yeah, I think two things from a system wide basis. It's like family. In everyday life, you may have arguments, disputes. But boy, when there is an external existential threat, people come together. And our system has really come together, I think, like never before. Franchisees realize we don't have the answer to every question right now. Some of us are, we're learning, we're evaluating the best science, the best input, but franchisees have been patient. They've worked with us. They've been collaborative. They've supported our decisions. It's really amazing that we don't have really dissension in the system. We've really come together as a collective and develop a consensus, way of doing business, and even putting through some of these additional safety measures. Franchisees have adopted these wholeheartedly, and so that's really tells me we built the right core values in the business. That when we were faced with this threat, we all came together and did the right thing. From a management team perspective, I had no doubt that this management team could step up and handle an event like this. I actually think, quite frankly, our management team was under challenged before this, because we had been on such a very unbelievable roll, positive development. Hadn't really been tested with a major negative event, and now just seeing how they've stepped up, how they've organized, how they've rallied franchisees, how they've developed outside experts. All of that was, it wasn't a surprise, but, certainly, really proud of it.
Well, having worked with those folks, I'm not surprised either, but I do have experiences with other folks in the industry that do what I do, and it is a tough time for a lot of people. And coming out of this, I mean, we're starting to open locations now, and the spas are, they've opened, and all signs are pointing to, man, this looks great. But you know what, Todd, you can't rest on your laurels, right? You can't get too complacent here. What concerns you now over, let's look 90 to 120 days, maybe even beyond that. Right. What are the things that are jumping out at you and concerning you at this point?
Yeah, I think it will be the continual regulatory environment here is a concern of, when we're able to get locations open safely, kind of how long various state governments are going to keep our locations closed. And the disparity in the application of some of those regulations. But I think ultimately, when we get locations open, when consumers adjust to the new normal with regard to procedures, the early kind of indications of the dozen or so that have opened so far are that the consumer wants this service. They want to come back. They, quite frankly, in this stressed environment, it's never been needed more. And so I think when we get past some of the regulatory issues, when we get past kind of what is the new normal procedure for doing this safely, I think that the business will thrive.
Outstanding. And the last question, this is my favorite. I'm kind of cheating a little bit, Todd, because it's a two-part question. But what would if you had, obviously we've got a captive audience, and we can, kind of send a message out. So what would your message be to the existing franchisees in the system, what would your message be to them? And then B, anybody looking at our system that is looking to possibly invest and become a new franchisee with the system, what would your advice be to those folks as well?
I think to existing franchisee, my first message is thanks. Thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for being, really, you are the example of the American entrepreneur. Our folks never got down. They were always looking ahead. What are we going to do when we reopen? How do we adjust the business? But I just did not hear, kind of despair and woe. It was forward-looking entrepreneurial spirit. And so we thank you for hanging in there, working with us, and realizing that, collectively, we have to come to a way of operating the business safely going forward. So to them, I think you're on the right path. And I think early indications are, we're going to be back. And I've seen these recoveries before, whether it was after 9/11, whether it was after the financial crisis meltdown. If you think back a year later, the world looked very much different. To prospective franchisees, I'd say you're very much in a position where maybe I was in 2009 when I was looking at investing in this business. We're in the midst of an economic meltdown in 2009. Joblessness was crazy, but I saw opportunity, and there's always opportunity in that kind of environment. And the opportunity I see here now are what the challenges were that we had going in. If I go back several months ago, the opportunity is, I think we're going to see lower rents in commercial leases, which you can now lock in your rent for 10 years and really set your financial future. I think we're going to see a greater availability of professional staff, massage therapists, and estheticians who are going to realize, as part of this crisis, they're going to realize that they would have been better off working at a Hand and Stone, a more stable business environment, than being an independent or working for a local, mom and pop. And ultimately, too, the final is, I think we're also going to see relatively low interest rates for a protracted period here. And again, for prospective franchisee coming in and maybe using debt or leverage to open 1, 2, 3 Hand and Stone locations, you will never see lower commercial interest rates than we're seeing right now. So I do see opportunity here, as we recover.
And what a great place to leave it, as an opportunistic person and someone that's always very positive and forward thinking. Todd, thank you for your time today. We appreciate you here in the treatment room. Hopefully the treatment of you was as good as we'd like. So thank you very much, Todd.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.